All right, chapter 2, evaporators. What do evaporators do?
Evaporators, they send out vaporize.
They vaporize refrigerant.
Right.
How do they vaporize the refrigerant? Where does the heat come from to vaporize the refrigerant?
It's the heat within the evaporator.
Within the evaporator?
Yeah.
It's heat in the box.
Okay, we're getting close. The heat from the air we pass over the evaporator, and in a hydronic system, the heat from the water we pass over the evaporator. Learning objections describe the functions of an evaporator, explain the evaporator temperature and the evaporator temperature difference, describe the evaporator types and styles, explain latent heat, sensible heat, and superheat, explain the relationship between evaporator temperature difference and humidity, and describe the evaporator defrost methods. Refrigeration evaporator. The evaporator's function: to absorb heat from the space.
Yeah.
Please remember this definition. It will help you later on, like during our midterm. Here's a cross section of an evaporator. You can see we've got aluminum fins with little copper pipes. And the little copper pipes is where all the action happens. The aluminum fins help the heat transfer from the outside air that's passing on the aluminum fins to the copper pipes. Warm air enters the coil. Refrigerant inside the tubing absorbs the heat. Then we have our R22 suction pressure at 50 psig. That is the evaporator temperature of 26 degrees. I think not for R22. Yeah, okay. Aluminum fins increase the heat transfer, and cool air leaves the coil because the refrigerant has absorbed the heat from the air that went into it. Remember, there is no such thing as cold, only the presence or the absence of
Heat.
All right. What is the evaporator temperature? The temperature of the refrigerant inside the evaporator tubing. Try and remember that. It isn't the air coming out nor the air going in, but the temperature of the refrigerant inside the tubing. How do we determine this temperature?
Pressure reading.
Pressure reading. Exactly. The pressure is going to correspond to a temperature, and that is our evaporator temperature. How do you measure evaporator temperature? Well, you take your low side pressure. Determine the suction pressure. Refer to the PT chart for that refrigerant. Mostly your gauges will have a PT chart on it if it has the refrigerant you're working with. Choose the temperature of the refrigerant at the suction pressure. Temperature difference versus delta T. In air conditioning, delta T can be very important, but we very rarely talk about temperature difference. In refrigeration, this becomes quite a bit more important. The temperature difference is the air temperature entering the evaporator minus the refrigerant temperature inside the evaporator. If you're taking notes, you want to write this part down. But the delta T is the air temperature entering the evaporator minus the air temperature leaving the evaporator.
So you mean to tell me all the paperwork that we got from you don't have?
Oh, it's on there. It's on there. But when you write it down,
Yeah, give me a second, give us a second, write this down.
Go ahead. When you write it down, you'll find that it sticks inside your mind a lot more clearly, a lot more resolutely. You can go through the notes because we've done all this before, but just reading it doesn't stick it in your head like writing it down does. That actually took some some muscle memory to do. So
Okay.
it stores it in your brain in yet another way.
Gotcha.